How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at The Mangler from 1995. This is directed by Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper, you guys probably know him for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He also directed Poltergeist, and much more relevant to this particular movie, Salem's Lot. This movie stars Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, as well as Ted Levine and Daniel Matmor, and this is based on a short story by Stephen King. I think this is actually one of the original Night Shift stories. Night Shift, his first collection, so always good to see another one of those adapted. Anyway, this one is about a big industrial laundry complex, and in the middle of it all is a giant laundry mangle, nicknamed the Mangler, and one day, this girl cuts her hand on a lever and bleeds onto the machine, and that sort of awakens a bloodlust inside the machine, and a bunch of people around this machine start dying or getting seriously hurt, and there's this detective and his quirky brother-in-law, and the two of them have to figure out what's going on here, and they soon learn it's deeper than just this initial incident. The history with the Mangler goes back a fair bit, and there's a sort of dark secret behind it all. So it's pretty interesting there, and this movie did come out to be a fair bit of fun. Lots of funny, cheesy moments in here, but it's worth noting the marketing for this movie, what it was initially advertised. Stephen King, Tobe Hooper, and Robert Englund all together in one movie. A trio, a famous director adapting a story from a famous writer with a famous lead actor, all big names in the horror circle. And it's worth noting that Hooper had worked with these two individually, just not together. He had adapted Salem's Lot, and Robert Englund was in his movie Eaten Alive before he was famous. Definitely check out both of those movies if you haven't already. Definitely worth looking into. But anyway, we had the three coming together for one movie. However, it wasn't a huge success. I mean, it did get 2 sequels, but it wasn't the big smash hit that they would have wanted, and not too many people talk about it today. But that being said, I think that is kind of a shame, because while this isn't the best thing ever, I really did enjoy it, and I think it needs a little bit more of a following, you know? This movie is really fun. I love the banter among the characters, and it's got some of that Hooper wackiness with an ending that's just absolutely insane. I feel that if this movie had come out earlier, because this is 95, and in the 90s, people were different. People were interested in, 90s cool stuff. But if this movie had come out in the 80s, the cheesy, over-the-top nature of this movie would have been an absolute smash hit in the 80s, but people were too busy being 90s cool for it in the 90s, I guess. But if you like that cheesier 80s horror, definitely watch this movie, especially that end bit. But my personal pros for this movie, obviously the characters. Robert Englund is pretty cool as this cartoonishly evil businessman. Think things like the old EC comics and stuff. But he's really, really evil, and he's hobbling around. Something has happened to him in his past that's, broken his legs, and they're in these big braces, and one of his eyes is bad, and he's hobbling around the factory yelling at people. He really, he really would get at home with the Texas Chainsaw family. And also, watching this, I really realized we really missed out on something not having Robert Englund play Ebenezer Scrooge. I would love to see Robert Englund play Scrooge after watching this movie. But anyway, there's him, an over-the-top, cartoonish, evil businessman, just loving doing this performance. And there's even this other guy, this guy that shows up to take photos that the detective is kind of friends with, and he shows up with this big old-timey camera with the flash bulb, and the bulb actually shoots out, and I think his name is something like JJJ Photo Man or something like that. A really ridiculous name, but between these two characters, Robert Englund and the weird photographer, it's like these are chainsaw characters, you know, these weird, wacky people that are just kind of off. So yeah, fun to see what's essentially chainsaw characters with that energy behind them sneaking into this movie. But also your leads. Your lead, a hard-boiled, you know, hard-drinking detective that's just on the edge of snapping all the time. And then his brother-in-law that's kind of a hippie, and he's gonna be the one going, nah, man, this is how we do the magic, you know? They play off each other really well. It's a classic combo, the angry one and the goofy one. And it really, you know, it kind of works, seeing their back and forth and, you know, watching them play off each other. It lent a good sense of comedy to this movie, you know? So I really did like the two leads, you know, the detective and the goofy brother-in-law. I thought that was really good. Also, with the message of this movie, you know, a lot of this movie is a metaphor for industrial accidents. And boy, those are some gruesome things. If you ever know anybody that works in an even semi-dangerous field, if you get them talking about industrial accidents, boy, there is some horribly gory stuff you can hear, and not too many horror movies talk about that. It's something that's very real and very terrifying, and to see them make a movie kind of talking about this, and, you know, talking about corporate greed and how, you know, sometimes the little guy gets stepped on in order for the business to soar and keep going, you know? So it is talking about a real world issue, you know? It is talking about employees' rights and, you know, the horrors of what can happen to the little guy, and, you know, it's got an important message behind it. And also, man, the grunge in this movie. You know, I read the short story, and I didn't really understand what a laundry mangle was. I never really seen one. And to see it in this movie, a big cast iron machine, and it's got the front of it where it almost is like a big mouth, and it's got large gears and like this bicycle chain, but each length is about the size of a freaking shoebox. It's big and overwhelming in that dark cast iron versus, you know, the whole factory where it's, you know, around, like, the factory is big and industrial, and you could wonder how anything ever gets clean in here, and it really does, again, mirror the real world, because if you ever go to any place where anyone's working and it's not a front of house thing, back of house at any business gets really bad sometimes. And yeah, this is a very creepy location, but also with the grunge, the gore in this movie's very bloody and it has some very intense gory moments. Yeah, a little bit needlessly so, but at the same time, it's a horror movie and you can tell the people are having fun, and blood is just gonna spray everywhere. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, but that's kind of why you like horror movies like this. But overall, characters, message, grunge, it's really fun, you know, and I do like this movie, and I do think it's pretty underrated, and I wish more people would talk about it. It's just a shame this didn't come out back in the 80s. If this was 85 versus 95, huge hit, you know? But anyway, definitely an underrated movie if you want to go to the movie and have a fair bit of cheesy fun, you know? Anyway, I do want to analyze this movie a little bit further, so I'm going to be talking a bit about the plot. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers, I'll be avoiding the ends and stuff, but I do want to analyze the plot a little further, so in this section, I'm going to jump in a little deeper. Anyway, with the plot, we open up with the Blue Ribbon Laundry, and I think this is actually the same laundry place that Carrie's mom worked in, if I remember my Stephen King lore correctly. But anyway, you get this young girl working there, and Robert Englund is actually her uncle, and he's lording over them, yelling at them. There's a manager that has to be mean to them, but you can tell he's being mean because he doesn't know any other way, and he doesn't really like it. And then there's also this new girl that's a little bit mysterious what she's actually up to, and we'll find more out about that in a pretty creepy subplot. But anyway, she's there, she's working on the mangle, and she cuts her hand trying to push too hard on this lever, and blood sprays into the machine, and yeah, a fair bit of blood. But they bandage her hand up, and they kind of send her out on the day, you know, big business will just keep treading forward. Well, the blood sprayed onto the mangle, and they clean it off, and they're working on the mangle again, and an old lady drops her pills onto the mangle, and she reaches to go get them, and there should be a working safety bar, but it pulls her in and squashes her, blood everywhere, and it'll get to the end and it will fold her up like a sheet. Ridiculously violent. But it's not just that. More stuff starts happening, like, you know, a hose comes disconnected and shoots steam at people. A lot of people criticize, they're like, you just don't have to go close to the Mangler. But they do change up the kills sometimes, and, you know, not everybody is just, touching it, you know? And, you know, they change it up, and the idea that you would have to interact with it because your boss told you to, you know? There is that in play here as well. And they do try to get creative, but like one thing that I wish they didn't do is one of the earlier, when she's cutting her hand, two guys bump into her with a fridge, and like lightning shoots into the fridge and possesses it so that the fridge can kill someone else later. That was kind of distracting to what should be a simple, straightforward scene, and it's like, it should just be the blood on the mangle, don't throw in this fridge stuff. But anyway, so the accidents start piling up, and the detective is called in, and there's this actually interesting shot before I move too far on. There's an interesting shot where you see some of the accidents, and it cuts to a sign where it says, what is it? Welcome to Rikers Valley, the industrial home of Maine. The industrial home of Maine, but the sign is right by a cemetery, right by a graveyard. So it's kind of, you know, a clever way of spelling out the point. Welcome to the industrial home of Maine, graveyard spread out behind it. I just thought it was a cool, you know, subtle way of saying what this movie's about. Anyway, back to where I was. The detective shows up, and to be fair, the detective doesn't have the best character introduction. He's driving, he's going way too fast through a neighborhood with all these twists and turns, and he almost hits someone. To be fair, it's a big truck that's in the road at an angle it really shouldn't be, but he gets mad at the truck and starts trying to give these guys tickets, and I'm like, dude, you are going way too fast. So not the best character introduction, but he eventually grows on you when you see that he's not really supposed to be at the best point in his life. You know, he is really, really angry and on the verge of snapping almost constantly. And like, he sees the first gory, gruesome death, and he actually throws up. And then later on, he'll see a water wheel, and that will remind him of the big gears of the machine. You know, kind of a case of you never know what's going to trigger someone. Something as innocuous as a water wheel is going to remind him of that time that lady got crunched up in the machine, you know? So it is pretty interesting, but as the killings happen, he talks to his brother-in-law, and I do like the setup for the brother-in-law. He's living in their guest house behind their house, but the wife is dead. So, you know, he's a good guy. He's not just going to kick the brother-in-law out, but the person who was connecting their lives is gone. So where does that leave their relationship? But he's talking to him, and he's like an English teacher who reads all these books, including ones on the occult, and he says, "How young was that girl? I bet she was a virgin. virgin's blood, powerful stuff. Probably awoken a hunger in the machine. And of course, we're gonna go on the journey where the cop thinks this is absolutely stupid, but as he sees more and more crazy stuff, is going to have to eventually believe it. And you get someone as wacky as this brother-in-law character, wacky in a different way than the cop, which is just on the verge of snapping and yelling at everyone all the time. It really is that classic, you know, silly one versus angry one trope, and it works well for a reason. And these two are a pretty fun pairing, you know? And they have to investigate, and they have to see how this goes deeper, and the Mangler's targeting one of the girls specifically. And overall, like, I get, you know, in the short story, I think it was just the blood awoke in the machine, and that was all it was, and I do really like the simplicity of that, but you are making a longer movie, and I get wanting to add more to it, and the stuff you chose to add was stuff about big business making bad deals for the little guy and running them over and sending them into the mangle, you know? So it did fit thematically, and it gave the movie a good message, but I do kind of miss the simplicity of just the blood woke it up, you know? But all that being said, it does lead to an absolute insane ending, and it's one of those where I'm like, okay, this is a good enough ending. Oh, we have about 20 minutes left? Oh, we're doing this now, that's crazy. Oh, we're still oh, it got even crazier. You know, and I really do love the ending of this movie. I love pure and total horror insanity, and that's what we get in here. So I thought it ended on a really good crazy note, you know? And I do want to go and watch the sequels soon. I know that they're probably not near as good as this one, but I mean, it piqued my curiosity, and I do want to see what they do with this series. So I'll try to get to the Mangler 2, and then the Mangler Reborn. I'll try to get to those pretty soon. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Stephen King playlist. I've talked about a few things like The Mist and the Langoliers, and I also talked about the Moby-sode version of Stephen King's End. So I have a few things in there if you guys want to see me talk about more Stephen King. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Stephen King playlist should pop up on the bottom. Have a good day now.